Hello again, gentlemen. Here we are. We're going to be going on to Starship 2 this time around. But before we do, I have another shout out to make. I hope you guys like that new intro that I put on my channel. And I want to thank Zeta X for making that for me. And yes, I'm not that good yet with any of the video makers and what have you. So he made that for me. I did not request it of him, but he gave me two choices, two different things that he made up, which I thought was excellent of him to do. And then he allowed me to use them and put them on my channel. So big shout out to him. Go over to his channel. He's also with Traversable MGTOW. Go to his channel too. Good guy, both of them MGTOWs. They do the Sunday podcast every Sunday, talking about men's issues. There are guests that come in there and do a lot of different things. So go over to that, and a big thank you to ZetaX for that intro. And we'll move on into the Starship 2, which the humble beginnings started with the 1966 Dodge Dart in stock form, bone stock. And I know a lot of you are going to be twisting around and squirming, thinking, how could I do this to a bone stock car like that and everything else? Well, that's what we did back then. So it was in front of my neighbor's house. Actually, the parents of my neighbors moved out and left the house with their kids, and he had a bunch of other kids move in. And this car showed up. So every night I was coming home on the way home, and I'd see this car sitting out in front, right on the street, and it never moved, it never went anywhere. And after a while, I started getting visions dancing in my head about being jacked up, slicks on it, and all these things started going through my head. And every day it got worse and worse till I finally walked over to the next door and I asked the guy, I says, what are you going to do with this car? And he told me he wanted to pull the engine and transmission out and he was going to junk the rest of the car. And I asked him, I said, well, uh, I'll make you a deal. I'll pull the engine and transmission out. I says, the entire interior, anything else you want out of the car, all I want is the body, and I'll give it to you. So you won't even have any work to do. And he agreed, of course. You know, it was a good deal for him, a good deal for me. I got a body. I didn't need any of the stock drivetrain, engine, anything, rear end, all of it. He could have it. So I went ahead and did that. And here, the first picture I have of it, and I can't find any earlier ones, but I'd taken the engine out and everything else, and I think I took the side windows out at this point, and the interior was out of it. And we went from this point onward to doing the chassis work, which, of course, the car had a little bit of rust on it there in the back. You'll see it at the bottom of the trunk. It had a little bit of rust over the wheel wells, but the body was straight. It was good. These old boats were made of some heavy gauge metal, so it wasn't a big deal. I knew we could patch that up relatively easy, but the body was straight. And what I did here, and no, I'm not stoned. Part of that is the cigarette smoke or smoke from the welder rising up. My wife surprising me to take a picture after I'd cut the back section of the car out. And this was done back then before I had a plasma cutter with tin snips and sawzalls and die grinders and what have you. So it was a long job. And I was just laying in the front cross member to the rear subsection, the subframe, if you will. And I'm putting up the rear cross member to that subsection. And the metal I got for that was from Chassis Engineering. It was 2x4 or 2x3 box frame, lightweight, very light. The whole bar, you could hold it up with two fingers, but extremely strong. I should have gotten the rail kit too, but I didn't. I thought I could cut the boxes out of the original unibody, and this is what you see, what I ended up with. Now, this was not the best way in the world to do it, but I thought at least it gives me the proper placement where I'd cut it, sectioned it in, and then I would bleed it together with tubing between the rails and what have you, and I would build my own shock towers, or coilover towers actually. They were coilover shock in the rear, weld into the cross braces and put the ladder bar system on it. The rear end was basically out of a Lincoln Town Car. It was a 9-inch Ford differential housing, which I ground out all the original, what do you call them, brackets, where the trailing arms went to and supports and everything else, and then got the wheels situated, took a measurement and what have you, ordered the axle bearing ends and the 35 spline Mosier axles, take them to a shop that had a jig to line up welding on the bearing ends. So narrowing the rear end was just the beginning of it. Attaching the ladder bars, making the cross section, everything there went very nicely. It was all fresh metal that I was attaching to. Everything was very secure. And I like the ladder bar setup a little bit better than I did the 4-link. At least for this car I did. The setup was quite easy. Well, for me it was anyway. And I mocked it up with the original carrier, the differential carrier. That is not the one that I ran later on. I ran a custom carrier, big bearing carrier. But I needed to get a rolling chassis, and I needed to find the height of the car. I needed to find where the wheels sit. I needed to find out how the center of gravity was going to be, and thus you'll see in future videos where the engine has moved back quite a bit because of the center of gravity and the weight of the car, which never really got that great. I went ahead and painted up the differential. In the center section, I don't know why I painted all that because I wasn't going to use it, but I wanted it to look good. I've welded on the brackets for the ladder bars, welded up the mounts for the coilovers. They're adjustable for your height, how you want the car to hook, and so you had a certain amount of adjustment back there. I was doing the brake backing plates, which I used off of a Lincoln. It was the same backing plates that the Lincoln had on it. Drum brakes in the back are good. They're self-energizing, or what some people would call self-locking. Once they're applied and you apply forward motion with the brake applied, they lock down even better, as opposed to disc brakes, which don't do that. So I kept the drum brake rear end, and I had all the parts there. Just of course new wheel cylinders, new pads, new everything. But it was pretty much a stock Lincoln braking system in the back. Basically, once I got it set up, and here's the thing too, is the car's on jack stands. It's the only way to really work on it to get into the top of it, get under it somewhat. You're crawling around on the floor. Thing is, when you've cut a car up like this, until you've got everything welded in together to hold it together, if you move the car, you're going to bend the body and chassis, and you won't end up with a straight car. Of course, you want to take your measurements to begin with to make sure that the car is straight and everything is square in it, but moving it after that is not an option. So everything needs to be set and stay put for the duration of getting a rolling chassis, getting it braced up, getting everything welded in. So we went into the rolling chassis, finally got to that point, and there it is. I got her on the trailer, and I don't believe I was going to the body shop because I shaved the rear tail lights and took the bumpers off and all the molding, trim, and what have you. So I think what was going on here is I used this trailer and I took the car to a guy I knew that bent up custom roll cage bars. So we were going to make this roll cage. I think I wanted a 8-pointer. I believe that was right, an 8-point. I'll have to look up my spec sheet. But he was going to bend the roll cage tubing for me and everything else, and that way I would be ready to go ahead and make my cuts and fits and everything else and start welding that in. Places like Chassis Engineering, who do sell kits for certain popular cars, really didn't have a roll cage kit for this vehicle, so it had to be custom done, and the proper thickness that NHRA requires the roll cage to be the proper steel. And of course, by now I'd had the MIG welder, so the welding process would be the right type of process that NHRA requires you to have the frame and roll cage welded together with. Actually, it would have been MIG or TIG welding. You can't have any type of porous weld, so of course you're going to have to run gas with the MIG welder, and no arc welding. That was a no-no. So anyway, we're going to stop it here on part 1. And I've got some more pictures to scan and get into the computer and everything, and I will make part 2 soon. So until then, gentlemen, have a great day.